The college football playoff rankings are out, and Missouri's path to the playoff is indeed a long shot. Plus, why are the Longhorns ranked so high ahead of the Missouri Tigers?
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And on today's show, later in the program, well, I do want to talk a little college basketball, including, is the Charge actually making a return after a very obvious absence last season? Plus, want to talk about Eli Drinkwitz and his obvious confidence in Matt Zollers. And before I get to all the college football playoff talk, I do want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. And here we are. Yes, the college football playoff is here. And if you base, well, the rankings, of course, do not include the automatic bids. Like notably Memphis, for example, who would be the group of 5 qualifier. Well, Memphis not even in the top 25 of these rankings. But as I'll pull up here, this ESPN bracket, as you see here, of course, Memphis would be playing Georgia in the first round of the college football playoff. Now, I want to make sure I have that right. I said Memphis not in the top 25 of the CFP. I think that's correct. I should make sure that that's absolutely true. The point is they certainly aren't in the top 12 or anywhere near it. Missouri, by the way, 22nd in these rankings. Notably, Oklahoma 11th and Texas 12th, by the way. So with the ACC team being outside of the top 12, that being Virginia, well, they slide into the top 12. Memphis slides into the top 12, and that would slide Oklahoma and Texas out. So you may be asking yourself, why is Texas 10 spots ahead of Missouri, by the way? Well, basically because, simply put, Texas has better quality wins than Missouri. On the other hand, you could certainly argue that Missouri has better quality losses. And of course, the Horns also needed overtime to beat 2 of the lowest teams in the SEC in Kentucky and Mississippi State. So you got to factor all of that in. I will say this, how this is going to play out. Well, the Horns still have Georgia on the road in Athens. That's going to be a tough game for absolutely anybody. And of course, they have Texas A&M to finish the season, that rivalry game in Austin. So plenty of chances for Texas to still get beat. I'll just say that I just don't think that I could certainly understand the case for putting Texas ahead of Missouri. I just don't understand 10 spots ahead of Missouri. But that's why, well, obviously, Missouri, not only do they need to win these last 4 games, they're going to need a little bit of help too, quite honestly. That's now been laid pretty bare and clear by the College Football Playoff Committee here. So once again, I'll bring up the graphic here of who that top 12 would be as of today. One thing that's obvious, well, you got to root against the Big 12 if you're a Missouri fan. But yes, also Texas as well. Ah, yes, what a wonderful bit of irony that is. But the point here really is that you got to, if you're a Missouri fan, if you're a fan of the SEC in general, you're a fan of Texas, you're a fan of Oklahoma, well, you're going to want to root against the Big 12 specifically. Right now in the playoff, you would have Texas Tech and BYU. Well, those 2 teams are playing this Saturday. Whoever loses that game, you got to hope that that team continues to lose, quite simply. So the Big 12, like the ACC, or at least as it sits today, hopefully would become a 1-bid league. By the way, if Notre Dame or Oregon lost, that would be great too, especially the Fighting Irish. But you know, you look at Notre Dame's schedule down the stretch, I'm not sure how likely that is. And quite simply, you know, Memphis just simply does not deserve to be in this bracket. And the whole concept of guaranteeing a group of 5 spot to a team was for an undefeated Boise State team. It was for an undefeated Central Florida, for example. Not what is a solid Memphis team, by the way, but a one-loss Memphis team that's calling cards so far this season is beating USF, South Florida, and also Arkansas at home, by the way. And their one loss, well, that was to UAB, who fired their coach, Trent Dilfer, earlier in the season. So a pretty brutal loss there for Memphis as well. I just think that there almost has to be, if you're going to have a group of 5 team in, they almost have to be undefeated. They almost have to at least be, I would say, in the top 20 or 25, whatever you think the cutoff should be in the college football playoff rankings. I would just say that, frankly, with 12 teams, especially moving to 16 teams, if you as a group of 5 team cannot make it into the top 12, cannot make it into the top 16, then what was the point of expanding the playoff in the first place? I think it was for those teams, again, the Boise States of the world, teams like Utah back in the day that went undefeated, I believe, or close to it in Urban Meyer's last season with that squad, that type of deal. UCF, we wouldn't be hearing the national championship talk. They would have gotten into the 12-team playoff back in the day. So to me, this guaranteeing the group of 5 thing, I don't really understand it at all, especially from the perspective of leverage. What is the deal with this? Like, I do understand why there are people like my colleague Chris Gordy over at Locked On SEC who thinks that really none of the conference champions should be guaranteed a spot. So yes, specifically you're looking at the ACC and the Big 12 realistically. Well, the bottom line is if you're going to continue to have those conferences be a part of the college football playoff, then just as a negotiating tactic, they're at the very least, they're going to want their conference champion being in said playoff. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. But the group of 5 teams, the teams that are outside of the Power 4, what is their leverage there? I don't really understand that. Listen, if Memphis or whoever is legitimately in the top 12, by all means, let them in. And maybe Memphis would have been had they beaten UAB. Then I could see the argument there. But a one-loss Memphis team, I just don't think that's right. Now, I will say this. I don't expect Texas to beat both Georgia and Texas A&M. The odds are certainly against that. But I will say this. Let's say Texas were to maybe beat Georgia and lose to Texas A&M or one or the other, and Missouri were to win out, for example. Well, then I think you'd have a lot of people arguing and forgetting about how week 1 really played out between Texas and Ohio State, because not all 1-score games, not all 2-score games even are created equally. And I just think that Ohio State really dominated that football game. And people are going to look at, well, Missouri's close loss to Alabama and Texas's close loss to Ohio State as the same. And I just don't see it that way. I think Missouri was, quite honestly, much more competitive in that particular ball game. Of course, one was at home and one was not. So there's that factor as well. I'm just telling you, Missouri losing by 3 with the ball and a chance to tie or win the game, not exactly the same result as Texas fans and their supporters, their arguers for the CFP. Well, I'm just saying they're going to be taking a little bit convenient of a lens looking at that Ohio State game that I thought was mostly dominated by the Buckeyes, especially that defense against the Longhorns offense that day. So that's just my point there. And another point is, I'll tell you, after listening to Eli Drinkwitz talk about Matt Zollers yesterday with the press, one thing is pretty clear. He's got a lot of confidence in the young man, and understandably so. He's a really talented player. And if you're ready to give up on this Missouri team, well, don't do it until at least the end of this Saturday. I will promise you that. So let's talk more about this Texas A&M game and Matt Zollers. But first, our title sponsor, yes, FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place To get in on the action, then FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when it's your team that's making that late push. So right now, new customers at FanDuel are getting $300 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And as you might imagine, Eli Drinkwitz is pumping up his quarterback and probably his confidence, and almost certainly trying to pump up his team and his locker room's confidence in the young quarterback, Matt Zollers, too. And Drinkwitz went on and on about, well, his arm talent, quite honestly, and said, quote, there's no defense for the perfect throw. And so that always gave him a chance. And to that point, I just want to see Missouri give Matt Zollers a chance. I would like to see specifically a chance to throw the ball down the field and show off that arm talent. Not just obviously throwing the ball into tight windows 10 yards downfield in zone coverage is great. That's a wonderful trait to have. But I just specifically because not only Zollers' traits, but the traits of all of these Missouri pass receiving weapons as well, why not try to stretch the defense more vertically? When you have guys like Donovan Olubade and Kevin Coleman and Marquise Johnson and Josh Manning has come on, I think, the last few games too. I just think Missouri has a lot of weapons there. And even if Brett Norfleet doesn't play, Jude James has shown that he's pretty capable of a receiving tight end as well. I think that's right. There is no defense for the perfect throw. Heck, Ty Simpson showed Missouri that at least a couple of times at Faurot Field a few weeks ago. Again, I just want to see Missouri give Matt Zollers the chance to show out a few times. I'm not saying have him drop back to pass 40 times. That would be absolute insanity, especially when Missouri does have a solid running game and a very, very talented running back in Ahmad Hardy. So I think even if those plays even if they're not even necessarily complete, well, we've all seen a million times defensive pass interferences and other flags down the field are always a possibility, but simply just trying to just loosen up that defense a little bit, get those safeties a little bit farther off of the line of scrimmage, that alone can make not only, of course, Ahmad Hardy's life easier, but the intermediate part of the Missouri passing game work a little bit better too. And on offensive play calling, Drinkwitz admitted that there's probably not a lot of additional stuff that they're going to add to the playbook for Matt Zollers at this point, but there certainly are things that his strengths. They're going to lean into his strengths just like they leaned into Beau Pribula's strengths. And quite simply, well, as Eli Drinkwitz said, his strength, his best attribute, that of Matt Zollers, is simply his right arm. So they're going to lean into that. And I think that may be a hint that, yes, I think it's obvious that Missouri is going to do fewer designed runs than it did with Beau Pribula, not only for injury conservation purposes, conserving the ankles and every bit of health of Matt Zollers, just trying to expose him to as little risk as possible, but also, simply put, that's more of a Beau Pribula strength than it is a Matt Zollers strength. Zollers is much more of a guy who I think can scramble his way out of trouble at times. I just don't see him as a ram you forward runner like Beau Pribula certainly enjoyed being, I think. So I think that's certainly a hint there. Also, I think a good, interesting quote here from Drinkwitz. I'll just read you the whole thing here. He said, quote, "There was a time early in camp where early in the season, I should say, where Beau was a little beat up and Matt was getting extra reps with the ones, and those are going to pay off for us now. We were really adamant throughout spring, throughout summer, and even in the fall to really focus on three spots to make sure that Matt was getting developed, because we knew he was the future of the program at the quarterback position. But the future is now. I think it's important for us not to put too high of expectations on that. He does not have to win this game by himself. He's got a really good core of players around him. And I think all of that is very true. Some of it is coach speak, but to the idea that, hey, they were trying to focus on this young man, they really felt like he was the quarterback of the future, that I believe. I think that it's pretty apparent, this young man's talent, and that he's got a chance to be something special. But I think it's also obvious that this is not an ideal circumstance. This is not what they wanted to happen. I remember when Sam Horn got hurt, I thought, well, this is a bit of a blessing in disguise, because for as much as this sucks for the team and obviously is devastating for Sam, and I feel horrible for him, well, for Matt Zollers, he's going to have to actually prepare each and every week as if he's one snap away from being in the game. And that's exactly what, of course, played out, unfortunately, for Missouri and Beau Pribula. But again, there may be a blessing in disguise here, even if Missouri doesn't play as well as it would like to, as all of our hopes and dreams would have us believe. But again, there may be a blessing in disguise here. We all know, I think, at this point, as difficult as it is to evaluate the quarterback position, one thing I think I know anyway, experience, reps, it all matters. And you just simply put, wearing a green non-contact jersey in practice is just not the same thing as facing live reps in a game. So this is something that Matt Zollers, again, the future of the program, hey, the future is now. For better or worse, at the moment, I'm just choosing to look at the bright side. You may even call me Mr. Brightside. And finally, obviously, Drinkwitz, and we all love Matt Zollers' arm talent. I think that's very obvious, as Drinkwitz alluded to. But Drinkwitz continued on the X factor, if you will. He said, quote, "I think there's just something about quarterbacks that have this innate ability to lead, and they're ready to have a belief in themselves. They're kind of a gunslinger, fighter pilot, quarterbacks, right? And Matt's got all of those attributes, and it's his time. So he's ready to roll." So again, a lot of confidence for Matt Zollers shown by his quarterback. And you know what? Speaking of quarterbacks, some decent news, some uplifting news for Beau Pribula that Eli Drinkwitz was able to share with us as well. And I do want to talk some more Missouri basketball, including, hey, it does look like the charge call has returned to college basketball. So let's talk about that and more right after these quick words. And an obviously ugly injury for Beau Pribula really turned out about as well as you could have possibly expected. No fractures for Pribula. X-rays looked clean. And according to Drinkwitz, he's going to be in a walking boot and going to be on the sidelines for this game. So that's a pretty good start toward his recovery, I would say. I'm still obviously skeptical that he's going to be back before the end of the season and all that, but just for the young man, I'm really, really glad, especially for his long term going into next season. He should be absolutely fine, it sounds like. I don't think there's going to be any real long-term problems here for Beau Pribula. So that is absolutely great news there. By the way, Marquise Johnson, in an interview with Power Mizzou, was giving a lot of praise to Beau, too, and also said about Matt Zollers, quote, "I know there probably is a lot going on, but Matt's a dog. Matt is going to get it done. I'm telling you right now." Hey, Marquise, now we're getting the idea of how we treat the quarterbacks. 2 thumbs up there for sure. Also, listener Quentin says, "Hey, John, big fan of the show, been watching for years. I'm curious about your thoughts on the fans' culture. I'll always be a Tiger fan, but I've seen a lot of toxicity from people who are supposed to be fans of this team. I think it's really coming to a head because we can't lose another game to make the playoffs, and Eli's name is circulating for all these jobs. Would love to get your 2 cents on this issue." Well, first of all, Quentin, thanks a lot for listening. for all these years and watching, of course. I'll just say, if you spend a lot of time, as I've learned over the years, in YouTube comments, TikTok comments, certainly on X, any form of social media, there's going to be toxic people, whether you're talking about politics or Star Wars or indeed SEC football. You're seeing it from not just Missouri fans, I'm telling you, all fan bases. Tennessee fans, Kansas State, Ohio State, Penn State, Florida, UCLA. They're all out there. I don't know that Missouri is any better or worse than most of those teams. I do think there are some fan bases that are a little bit worse than others, and of course some that are more benign. The way I see it, though, I just think Missouri fans, I think they have their sort of loud, obnoxious fans, of course, but I just don't see it as being that much better or worse than most similar fan bases. That's just how I look at it. Maybe you all will disagree with me on it. But by the way, on college basketball, of course, Missouri won by 21 against Howard on the road. Well, last season, Missouri beat Howard by 15 at home. So perhaps is that a good sign? I don't know. It depends on how you're looking at it. Howard was in the 200s or so in KenPom last year, projected to be 307 this year. So not exactly a great barometer, I don't think. I will say this, it does seem like the charge might be back in college basketball. After last season, for all intents and purposes, the charge was just dead. I mean, you would see, especially the off-ball charge. Well, it seems like it may be starting to come back a little bit based on the previous game I saw. It would be nice to see some balance, I'll say that, because it really had felt like the last 15 years or so that the charge had become completely out of balance, where guys are just diving in front of ball carriers, of dribblers, I should say, and just getting the call consistently. Whereas last year it was almost impossible to be a help defender, especially, and draw a charge. So if we've got a little bit of balance back, I wouldn't mind seeing that. One thing I'd like to see more from the Tigers too, won the rebounding battle against Howard 48-27. So the Tigers really used that massive height advantage that they had against Howard, and one that they should have in most ball games, even in the SEC. This is a very formidable team size-wise, are the 25-26 Missouri Tigers. So to me, again, I keep harping on this. I'll harp on it again. Defensively, stay in your lane. Don't overhelp. Don't double team when unnecessary. Box out your man, get the rebound, and get down court to what promises to be another really good Dennis Gates offensive basketball team. Those are just my thoughts so far. And you know what? If you want to get me and more thoughts on this Texas A&M game, well, guess what? I've got in the Locked On Aggies host, Matt Galtazon. I'm going to have to ask him how to get that last name exactly right. But Matt and I will have a crossover episode for you in your feeds on Thursday morning right here on Locked On Mizzou.